Hi, I'm Tammy Potter, and welcome to the Pregnancy Process Podcast, a show designed to help you navigate the hugely transformative journey to motherhood, where you'll hear the unique experience of experts in this area and the incredible stories of women sharing their conception, pregnancy, and postnatal journeys so that you can have a healthier, more informed pregnancy. In today's episode, I talk to Dr. Robyn Thompson, founder of the Thompson Method. After spending the majority of her 60-year career as a dedicated home birth midwife and having many women experiencing breastfeeding complications and trauma referred to her, Dr. Thompson became curious about whether the trauma occurring was a result of the methods used within the hospital system. This curiosity and question led to 7 years of research and being awarded a PhD for her personal contribution to breastfeeding research and practices. In 2014, with a mission to educate midwives and healthcare professionals on best practices for breastfeeding, Dr. Robyn Thompson founded the Thompson Method. In this episode, we're going to talk all things birth, breastfeeding, and the Thompson Method. We'll take a historical look at breastfeeding and talk about how the transition to a more medicalised birth has impacted the way women breastfeed after birth and how we've gotten so off track. We discuss why so many women are experiencing difficulties and pain with breastfeeding and why the first 72 to 96 hours after birth are so critical to the breastfeeding journey. Dr. Thompson, thank you so much for your time today. It is fantastic to have you here with us, and I'm really, really looking forward to this conversation.
It's a pleasure.
You have had such a prolific career, which has led you to developing the Thompson Method. And I'd really like to start by talking about your experience, the process and the research process that led you to developing the Thompson Method and actually gaining your title of Dr. Robyn Thompson, which I know is such an amazing feat. So if we can start by talking to that would be incredible.
Yes, it's a surprise to me too, don't worry. I never ever envisaged being in the situation I'm in now, in the privilege of the situation that I'm in now. I've never ever envisaged it at all. I was always a good midwife, a great practitioner, but never thought that I would do anything in the way of academia. So I have 3 professors to thank for guiding me in that direction and keeping at me till I actually did something about it. I'm one of those people that have to have an answer to why things are happening. So that's how it all started. I was visiting mothers at home through the Darebin Maternal and Child Health Service and I'd already started keeping a database, but that wasn't used, of course, but I had now some idea about collecting data, which I'd never had before. And I was seeing the same problems in my own private practice. So once I started with Darebin, this was crazy, seeing women coming home from hospital in so much pain, with so much trauma when they were wanting to breastfeed. And they kindly gave me the consent to photograph what I was seeing. I didn't identify them wholly at the time, but I was able to show the trauma that I was seeing that was taking my breath away as a midwife of a long time, things I'd never seen before. And that grew with a database, and I had help from leading analysts, and they were very impressed with my data, and so it grew from there. And then when I was at Charles Darwin University studying my master's, again, I don't know what happens in my life, it's a journey. I got called up to the office one day and I thought, oh, hello, I'm in trouble. And that was to tell me that my master, after 1 year, had been converted to a PhD. So I moved on willingly and as best I possibly could, because I was learning all the time. I'd never been an academic before. I mean, I'd done my own study through my nursing and midwifery, maternal and child health and other courses that I took, but I didn't ever envisage. So that's why I'm here now. Thanks to all the beautiful and wonderful women who chose to have time with me.
And the process that led you there was 7 years of research, and that's not even including the 60 years, did you say, of midwifery?
It was 6 years of research, and then I added 2 more identification of things that I found. So I added 2 more things to the database, and that became then 4 years that was analysed. But 6 years I had done, and in my own practice you can say 7 years, of data collection. And that was really starting to think, gosh, we have to rethink what we're doing. Why are we doing what we're doing? And that led me to writing a thesis and some papers, of course. I've written a few papers as well, but you wonder where the time goes, really.
In terms of breastfeeding and the trauma that you've already mentioned, I mean, sadly, almost every single woman who has appeared on the Pregnancy Process podcast who's spoken about their breastfeeding journey in some way, shape, or form has talked about how painful the experience was for them. And I know it doesn't need to be this way. Why do you believe so many women are experiencing difficulties and pain with breastfeeding?
I think part of our education is that we have an understanding that all women do the same thing. All breasts are the same. All breasts are the same. All nipples are the same. All babies are the same. And what happens really is that if we think about it logically, every person on the planet is unique. Genetically unique, biophysiologically unique, anatomically unique. All babies are supposed to put on weight, but some babies grow tall and their head grows with them. So every other sign is perfect. We are also neurologically unique, psychologically, emotionally unique. Everything that we are is unique. So I came to thank goodness to all these women, recognising how unique everybody was. So when I'm working with a mother and her baby, I'm not considering everybody else. I'm working just with her. And I'm also working with her emotional, psychological state as well, because depending on the circumstances that she's been through, sometimes it's been very traumatic. And more so in these years of my practice is the trauma women are experiencing, something terrible. And never did I see that in my early years of midwifery practice. So I have that comparison and I'm thinking, why are we doing what we're doing? Women are capable. And now we have, if they don't, for example, do this in a certain time, then this is what you have to have done. And then the cascading intervention starts and the woman's out of her zone. She can't look after herself in the way that she chooses to. Of course, there's times when they need help, and we understand that clearly, but a very experienced person wouldn't be doing what they're doing to women at the moment. And one of the major factors that I am concerned about is the rupturing of the forewaters. If you rupture the forewaters, you're changing the hydraulic pressure, number one. And number two, you're changing the water volume that the baby drinks during pregnancy, during labour, during birth. They're drinking, and every time they drink, they're hydrating, and they have the hiccups each time they drink, so we know they're drinking. And then we have ultrasounds that say, oh, you don't have enough water there, your baby's too small. I've just spoken with a mother this morning, and she was told all these things, and her baby was born perfect. Nothing wrong with her baby at all. And all that time, she's now in a deep emotional, psychological state, worrying, sweeping membranes. That's why I made the video, keep your fingers out of my vagina, please. There's so many things to consider that we do to women that is not necessary if we are genuinely working with and beside them. So uniqueness, every pelvis is different. You cannot say that every pelvis is the same. It's not. And the minute we lay women on their back, which we do so many times, we are flattening the mid-pelvis, so then the baby can't progress. So then they become failure to progress. They're not failing at all. They need to be able to be mobile in their own way. And of course, one of the biggest blessings is the water, the deep warm water. They hop in that, the buoyancy just helps them immensely through, and generally towards when it's becoming really good established labour. once it's really good established labour, that those sort of things help. But each woman being unique in what she needs to do, and not telling her what to do, how to do it, not standing over her and telling her to push. No one knows her rhythm, what's happening in her body, her brain, her rhythm, her cycle. Nobody knows that. They might be able to know that she's having a contraction because they can hear, or they might, if they use their fingertips gently, they'll feel it. But again, that the women are telling me that doesn't happen so much anymore either. So I don't know. But one of the worst things is to stand in a dominant position over a woman and instruct her to push. And then I believe we cause so many more problems by doing that, because we're not working with her body and her embracing the birth of her baby and the baby working with the mother. It's all synchronized in that individual mother's journey. So the old girl does become quite frustrated at times, and I become very sad when I hear the stories. I do quite a lot of debriefing with women, and I might encourage them to write their story. I do a lot of pre-birth discussion with women, and I do have a template that they can use and take whatever they want from it to use in their own plan if that's going to help them. But again, there's no rules in anything I do. It's all about that unique woman and her journey. It's not about what everybody else has to do or what I think they have to do. So that's my midwife. I'm so blessed, honestly. I can't believe it sometimes how blessed I am to be placed in charge of a labour ward 3 months after I was through as a midwife. I just received that 3 months. I was placed in charge of a labour ward. I was there for years, and then I home birthed for 25 years. And that's where I learned so much from women and what they can do. Oh, they taught me so much more than I would have ever known if I hadn't have gone and done some beautiful home birthing with women and in their time, not my time. And I travelled wide and far. I became known as the travelling midwife. Even to Japan for my first grandson's birth, born at home, and the Japanese Midwives Association were brilliant. They didn't even want me to register. They were brilliant. We had a beautiful home birth, and one of their midwives came with to the birth, and she'd not been at a home birth, and she cried. So there was a lot of nurturing going on, and it was just beautiful. I left a beautiful note as she left. She left it on the side table. And then my second grandson was born at home in Melbourne. So I was there for his birth, and his Japanese grandmother was there for his birth too. So it was really, but I've travelled wide and far, interstate. I've been with a woman on the plane that gave birth, bless her, to a stillborn baby. I've had so many experiences that I never, ever would have imagined happened in my life. 33,000 feet in the air, and she was just an amazing woman.
Wow, the stories that you must be able to tell are just amazing. And you've seen me like furiously nodding my head while you're talking. I'm like,
I hope I'm not boring you, but I just
nothing about the process of pregnancy bores me in the slightest. I'm so fascinated by the whole process and the physiological process and everything that happens in the woman's body, and it's incredible what women's bodies do. And
gestation is unique. It is not a calculated gestation, and if it is calculated, it's an average. It's not a mathematical thing at all. And I've had some women go to 43 weeks, and right through their family history is the 43-week gestation. There's tribal women that have a 43-week gestation.
And this really feeds back into what you were saying previously about the cascading interventions and the individualization of that. Say you've got a woman whose family history goes through to 43 weeks, yet these days they really probably wouldn't let you go through to 43 weeks. And then so what they're doing, rather than letting the natural physiological hormonal process, that's mind, body, spirit type thing, almost all working in together, they're coming in and they're interfering in that because of the calculated gestation.
Right. Mathematics is applied, and it's generally, especially for first-time mothers, a pre-labour, early labour, established labour. People have lost. It's if you don't do this in certain time, then this is what's going to happen. Epidurals. Why aren't we doing sterile water injections if a woman really needs pain? That's not going to make the sleepiest baby syndrome occur. It's the opioids are affecting the babies, and we're seeing that all the time. Every time we see someone who's had opioids, a sleepy baby syndrome's occurring. And then they have the formula, they have everything imposed on them because we've made that happen.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, because this is totally your department, not mine. But when you mention opioids and sleepy babies in relation to breastfeeding, and there's so many areas that we'll go into in relation to this, but I would say that would interfere with the natural instinctual breastfeeding behavior and experience of the baby. Am I correct in that?
Well, yeah, the milk's not peaking till about 72 hours on the average. That's a bit mathematical, but it's around that. And then by that first 75 hours, the first breastfeed is so important for transfer of colostrum. So if the baby's affected by opioids, they can't do that. And then they're being forced to the breast because that's the education and that's the expected behaviour. And then, of course, then they can't use their oral cavity to full potential, and then that's when the mothers end up with nipple trauma. And once the nipple trauma started before they've even left hospital, then it's a real journey for that mother. It's really sad that it has to happen that way. And so there is a real need to relearn. I know some people sometimes might get a bit annoyed with me, but I understand that. But I also know that I've done the research and I've done the work and I've studied every possible thing that's functional in that process that I thought was happening. And so understanding how the oral cavity functions under the tongue muscle, how they synchronize, all of those things are so important to understanding why we don't do those things. And we certainly don't touch the newborn baby's occipital bone, because housed behind that is the small brain, and the small brain coordinates all their little movements like ours do. So imagine if we were held by the back of the head, we wouldn't be able to do the things that we do either. And then forced to the breast. That's one of the biggest problems that we see.
Now, you mentioned the first 75 hours, did you say?
72 hours, about the first 75 hours, yeah, about the first 3 days. So let's go days. The first 3 days is when the milk's peaking, and then the babies generally know to feed frequently if they're not affected by opioids, and they'll feed, and then they'll have a little break, and then they'll feed again, and mothers get very tired in that time. But they're doing that specifically to release the prolactin and oxytocin, and the process is beginning. And what we see at the other end of that is a huge reduction in breast engorgement when they've done that. And then they're ready to feed on from there, and then it takes another week or more, who knows, I don't know. It's never a set time for the volume to regulate, because the volume's at high peak time, and then it regulates back to, and then there's a worry, there's not enough milk. There's plenty of milk, it's just regulating to the baby's growing needs.
Right, so if you could describe what an ideal first 3 days would look like for a new mum, in your experience, what would that look like?
Well, first of all, preferably don't interfere with her labour and birth unless there's an absolute emergency, and then only the senior medical person can make decisions on that. And just let her give birth in the time that she has with an experienced midwife, and preferably someone who's also mentoring some of the younger midwives or the new midwives. Not all young anymore, there's quite a few who are in the older category. And then don't cut the cord, right? Don't cut that cord. That baby needs those red blood cells.
Yeah.
It needs the red blood cells. And yes, and of course we'll be having anemia if we don't if we start interfering with all of the natural things. People seem to be worried about, we never used to cut the cord years ago. We used to wait. And now it's like cut the cord. And there are some people now who are changing their practice with that, which is good to see, really good. And then the baby with the mother, no one else handling the baby. And preferably the baby handle, if it's going to be balanced on hands, on the back and shoulders, bottom and shoulders, supporting the baby's back to the mother. And if she can't, to the partner, to who her advocate is, whoever's with her, so that we don't interfere with the baby's desire to smell, taste, touch, and to locate and to be with the mother. The baby knows its mother's smell. The baby knows everything about its mother. So we don't touch, we just wait and watch, and we don't put beanies on, because imagine coming out of this soft environment and you've come through water, you have come through the bony pelvis, but you've made your way through and now you've got this thing stuck on your head. It's not meant to be a beanie baby. It's meant to be covered with a beautiful warm soft cloth, which we do. And then when that's absorbed the moisture, you don't rub the vernix off. You just let the mother and the baby be. There's nothing wrong with the baby being on the mother unless she's worried about it. If the mother's worried about it, that's different. APGAR scores 7 or above. When the APGAR scores 7 or above, don't touch the baby, let them be together. This is prime time for that external connection that they're making, prime time. And then once the baby settles in with the mother, you'll see, if you have the time and the ability to watch like I've done all those years, you'll see it's just phenomenal the way the interaction goes. And then when the baby's ready, you'll see the baby starting to do what it does to survive. And what it does to survive is it starts moving towards a breast. And it's actually capable of doing all that if it's not affected by opioids. And you'll get sick of hearing that, but anyway, that's the way it is. And remember, the little liver can't break all that down very quickly, so it takes time for the binding process to work. So it can't happen quickly. And so the baby will make its way to the breast, and then the mother will work with the baby. But most important, nobody grabs the baby by the back of the head, tries to gape the mouth open, tries to shove the baby on while they're holding the breast, reshaping the breast. No, that's not how Mother Nature meant it to be. So trouble is, there's so many babies affected by opioids now that it is a problem, because once they've had that first feed, they go to sleep for quite a while. And then when they wake up, the colostrum's thick and rich, and it's now doing its job in the baby's intestines and right through the microbiome system. It's actually doing its work, and then goes off to sleep. It's done its hard work, and then wakes up when it's ready. And there's time limits on when it has to wake up, and that's, you're just watching and observing the baby. You don't need to put time limits on it unless it's had opioids. And then the baby wakes up and feeds frequently, up to 72 hours, roughly. It's not exactly, but it's up to there and that's what's making the milk volume increase. And then when it's gradually increasing, you start to see and hear the baby swallowing more. And so the baby's on track. But we want to, your baby's blood sugars are too low. Well, it's just done a whole lot of work. Mother's done a whole lot of work. The blood sugars will come up. I don't know. I've probably come through the era where we didn't do all that. So through that era, we didn't do all that. It was not a major issue for us to have to meet all this criteria and policies and guidelines and all that. It was just about being there and thinking and watching and observing and knowing. That they were the things we did, and being really respectful of the mother and her baby. So things have changed. And now I think there's a move back. I think there's a change happening now, because there's a lot of women telling their stories. And, the more stories that the women tell, it does make us realise, particularly people like us, just how much damage is being done to a mother who's very capable of doing what she does. And now she's running in her adrenaline's up, she's running on fear. So she's, cortisol, they call it, but in my day it was adrenaline. Your adrenal glands were rocketing. Yeah. So I want to see, before I leave Mother Earth, I want to see mothers respected for their knowledge, for their wisdom, for their instinct. Every mother is so instinctive for her baby. And if we just watch, listen and observe, and even in labour we can hear the sounds they make, their facial expression changes, their body language changes, their height begins to change as the baby descends too. And they come down, 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 or they'll lean forward, forward, forward. And that's all spontaneous. They do that within their own good time in the way that's right for them. Very, very, very knowledgeable, intuitive, capable, and their bodies, our bodies, female bodies, are designed to do what they do. The ligaments, everything to do with our pelvis is designed to do. We might have broader pelvises, we might have thinner pelvises, but that doesn't mean to say they're not going to meet that little baby's needs. We don't know. I've just seen a baby this week with a terrible Kefal hematoma, and the person putting the forceps on obviously did not know because they were not on properly. You could see where they were out of order. So those sort of things worry me immensely because they're the traumas that happen for the rest of your life. You think about that. And even though the baby grows and you work through it, it's always there. It's that experience is always there. And the torticollis from all that, from all those things dragging babies out is just phenomenal. People don't realise how much that affects breastfeeding. Terrible.
As a strength coach who works in this area, as soon as you mention forceps, I'm just like, oh, because I know the impact, and this is from a different perspective, not a breastfeeding perspective, but from the perspective of working with mothers who've had horrific pelvic floor trauma from forceps deliveries. And all of this comes back to what you were talking about before in terms of the emotional, psychological state and the trauma that the mother's experienced, the baby's experienced, and how this impacts their journey together as like a mother-baby dyad, which would definitely impact the breastfeeding journey. And in terms of the psychological, emotional trauma type things that we've been talking about, there definitely is a link between breastfeeding, mental health, and the psychological factors that kind of go along with what we've just been talking about. Can we talk a little bit about how that does affect breastfeeding?
Yeah, well, if you can imagine a mother's stressed all the time, she's not sleeping. I mean, not that they sleep well anyway, but they're hopefully, if they've had the right preparation, they're prepared for that and it's not become a major issue. But there's so many traumas, I don't know where to start. It's the pain, the rest of life trauma for their perineum, their vagina. Why are we doing things to that? Because that's for the rest of their sex life, the rest of the next baby. And all of those things are imbalanced in that time, over that time. If we're not gentle and calm and not, I don't know, there does not seem to be, for me, and I don't know whether I'm right or wrong, but from what the women are telling me, there's just not enough mentoring with skilled people. And one example, a woman born with a low spina bifida, 5 injections to try and get an epidural into her through her spinal bifida. Why would we do that? Wouldn't happen in my practice. I wouldn't let it happen. So again, I think we have to stop, we have to look, we have to listen, and we have to change what we're doing at the moment. If everybody heard the stories that I hear and my colleagues hear almost every day. It's not every single day because I do have a day off here and there. But it is phenomenal in what we're hearing, and it's really worrying for the old midwife like me and my colleagues too. So I'm at this age and stage where I need to speak up. I need to speak out, and I'm not being much different from when I was in charge of the labour ward too. I have removed forceps from doctors who were putting them on for the third time, for example, or whatever was happening. Yeah, and I've done a whole lot of things that probably other midwives haven't had that experience to do. I think that's an issue, but I did have that experience because we were there to protect the women and look after them, and we're all there to do that. And we're all there to use our skills, our medical colleagues as well, when they're required, but we're not there to do what we're doing at the moment to women and their bodies. And that's not everybody, and I make that very clear, but it is a high proportion of people who are experiencing these things.
Absolutely. And from my own experience, I talk a lot about safe practices when training during pregnancy, because that's my area of expertise. And I think, like yourself, when you've been exposed to the effects of training incorrectly or that type of thing in the postnatal woman and seeing how it affects them, that's when you want to advocate for changes. And because we see things that maybe not everybody else does, so they're a little bit maybe laissez-faire about it, or they don't see the effects of it. So absolutely, we all need to speak up and speak out and try and make sure that women at all stages of this journey are well looked after by experts.
They're not separate entities, they are transitions. They are transitions of a mother growing this tiny little baby from a sperm and an egg, right? They're transitions from that into pre-labour, early labour, established labour, and then on to giving birth in the way she needs to, and then on to breastfeeding her baby if she chooses. And if she doesn't, then I work with women who bottle feed their babies as well too. And then on, I like to be available for the first 6 weeks. But again, not everybody can do that, I know. But again, the more we start to prepare for that, and the more we stop all this attention to insurance as a first denominator, it's just crazy. We're changing things because people are frightened because of insurance, or people are wanting to gain money via insurance as well. There's a whole range of things happening that people like me would never have experienced, yet we got on with our beautiful midwifery life and had beautiful medical colleagues. I can't tell you that I had the best medical colleagues, even when I was home birthing. Obstetricians and GPs, 2 in particular who were amazing. Always there, always ready to chat, always ready to help, using their skills when they needed to, but not interfering in between. And I was very fortunate. I did not need insurance. I didn't need all the things that are happening now because I was not going out to cause harm. I was practicing as the reasonable midwife would do in the circumstances. And we had established beautiful relationships, and we were able to go to a hospital whenever we needed. And I never ever transferred by ambulance. So it's learning the skills and being mentored and being respected for. I talk about, instead of training, I talk about being educated. I don't see it as training, but I talk about being educated. If you're educated and you really ask the questions and you really follow and look into depth of the things that you want to know about or that you need to know about to be able to pass the level of requirement that you're at any one stage in your career, then you need to really understand. And that's very important.
Absolutely. And one thing that I talk about a lot is the strength in the pregnancy process is becoming educated around your options.
Absolutely, no doubt. And in pregnancy, as much as you can absorb, rather than when you're being told what to do afterwards. Yeah. And then having the courage to say, have a meeting and say, this is my preferred way. And I understand if things don't go that way, I understand, but and I know what the law of consent says. And then move on from there about what I would like to do. And some people cope with that well, others don't.
We've talked a lot about the medicalisation and the changes over history. So can we take a historical look at breastfeeding and talk about how the transition to a more medicalised birth has impacted breastfeeding and how it has changed the way women breastfeed after birth? But more importantly, how have we gotten so off track?
I don't know how we've gotten so off track, to be honest. I do not know, because I don't think I would have coped very well if I was in the system now. I would have been, well, I can't tell you the stories of what I have done, and I've stopped and I've taken that courage to do that and learnt by it, and then being rewarded for doing those things because of the things that go on. But if you go back to pregnancy, we're doing, the women are telling me, up to 5 ultrasounds. Now, I've just had a lady today, a mother today, who had 5 ultrasounds and was told her baby did not have enough water. Her baby was underweight, but too small, that she'd have to have a cesarean section. That was what she was told. Her baby was born normal size, happy baby, no problems. She's come to me for some breastfeeding because her baby was shoved to her breast and put on all those. So we're just transitioning. And the latest is, not the latest, it's been for a while, babies with nipple shields. Put a nipple shield on because it's all too busy and too hard. Now, I understand they're busy, but that's not the way we practice. And so the nipple shield changes the whole oral cavity function, if you understand how that works. Tongue muscle function, everything changes. And then the baby becomes adapted and brain imprinted with the sensation of silicone. So that becomes survival. And so there's so many things. I can't go into the depth of it all. It's very deep, and I do have videos of all these things. So yeah, and one thing after the other, these poor women are under pressure. So going back to where we were, so then you come through pregnancy, you come through the labour and the birth, depending on what happens there. And then with the breastfeeding, the first feed is often delayed. Someone takes the baby out to do all the routine procedures. Routine procedures are not necessary. And the isation syndrome, which I have done, completed and presented many times, is a PowerPoint presentation on the isation syndrome, all the isation words that fit to what we do and how we go about it as in this modern living way with women. And our preparation with them is not, I don't believe, being honest. So if you are planning a cesarean section, what's the detail of that surgery? They don't know that. So many people don't even know their bladder is going to be removed from the front of the uterus and popped outside while they make the low incision. I've had 4 women recently who've had open wounds at one side of their wound that has not healed for weeks. And so when I hear all this, I think, what is going on in those places? What is happening? So many women with infections, and then they're all having antibiotics, so that then affects the baby through the breast milk. So the poor little baby's gut, the babies are crying, unsettled. Do you want me to keep going? And I'm telling you, this is honest. I hear and see and talk with these women around the world, not just here, around the world. Between us all, we're covering every day in my team.
So when it comes to immediately postpartum,
yes,
what advice would you give women to help them advocate for what they want immediately postpartum? Because it's such an important time.
Her and her partner talks with the people that are going to be looking after her. And if they don't know who it's going to be, they talk to the senior people in the hospital. And then they say that it doesn't matter who's there, I want this information in my history. And I want people to read this, please. And if my baby's APGAR score is 7 or above, my baby comes to me, nobody else. It does not handled by anybody else other than me. And if I can take my baby myself, that's even better. Some women choose to do that, some don't. Again, that's up to the mother and what she chooses to do, and following her choices helps her come from the other side with a mother that's not under stress, not being She might be tired because she's a little sleep with a newborn baby, because they have to feed around the clock to keep up their calorie and their nutritional load. So that's normal because they're growing so fast in that time. But there's so many factors. There's not just one. Then it comes to coming to take the baby, to do this to it, to do that to it. Now, the mother, could you ask the mother, please, is it convenient for you now? And do I have your consent to do this with your baby? Well, I would say, could you bring that here and we'll do it together? They're the sort of little things that we could do. Can you set that up? And also, I ask mothers to talk about their babies weighing, not just one way, but repeat it 3 to 4 times. And in exactly the same place, no changes except zeroing, because so many women are telling me that the weights of the baby are inaccurate. So all I can do is follow what the women are telling me and try and make the difference that's required by informing the women in pregnancy about those things that you can be. So if the partner's there and the partner's been through the prenatal preparation with them as well, that's a real advantage, because they feel more confident too. They're much more confident when they have some knowledge about it all as well, and how the system works and what happens. And policies are not law, so we do not have to follow policies. If it doesn't suit us, if it doesn't suit the mother, she does not have to follow a policy. So that's to appease the institutionalisation, and we do not need to do that. Again, we need to be clear about everything in the moment, and so that we're observing and listening and being fully aware of what's going on. And if we are too busy, we need to speak up. We need to say, no, this is not safe practice. I cannot continue to do this. You will have to find some other stuff, please. Yeah. And that's protecting my colleagues, because they need protection as well. In a lot of times they need protection as well.
I love that about making sure that the partner is involved in that as well, because I think that's such great advice, because that's what they're there for. And whoever it is that's going to be there with you,
their advocate, their chosen other person, yeah.
That they're fully educated around what the process is going to be. And I've read about the golden hours and the 3 golden hours. Are we okay to talk about that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. That's come from my practice from home birthing. Mm-hmm. And learning about how babies and mothers work together when you don't interfere or you don't touch. And they take their time. It's precious time. They don't have to rush, and they don't have to do anything in a hurry. And learning how long the babies would sleep afterwards when they've been through this and they've done it without intervention or interference. Yeah, it's amazing.
So in terms of the Thompson method, how is the Thompson method different to the current methods being used?
Minimal intervention only when it's needed.
Yeah.
The mother is capable as long as we are with and beside her. We don't need to be over her. We don't need to be telling her what to do. We need to be gentle, calm, and respectful all the time. And that goes all the way through. That doesn't stop. We continue that all the way through. And we provide information for her on her journey as she goes, and what she can take and what she can absorb, or what she asks and what she needs. It's not about what we think we should tell everybody. That's the difference, because it depends how many babies she's had. It depends on her lifestyle. It depends on her journey. It depends on her genetic background. There's a whole lot of factors. It's not one thing. So by listening to what her needs are, then I can process with her in the way that she needs to, and always telling her that I do not go by mathematics. The human body is biophysiological. I do not tell people what to do. I make suggestions and then let her deal with the way she needs to. Or if I hear her saying something that's standing out, that's very instinctive, I'll say, there's your instinct. And quite often when I do the Q&A sessions, the last sentence is their instinct. It's exactly what she's thinking. So I can respond in a way that's appropriate for her most times, not all the time, 100% of the time, but most times, yeah. And then when you come to breastfeeding, don't interfere, because it takes up to 3 hours. It doesn't take 3 hours for everybody, but 1 hour if they start to come and take your baby and then take the baby from the breast, which does happen, we've interfered with the whole process. So the baby will feed from both breasts as it needs to till it reaches that level of emotional and gastric satisfaction, and then it'll sleep. And then not waking the sleeping baby unless you're concerned and you're looking and observing, but not waking the baby all the time to do things to it. One of my biggest problems at the moment is and I won't get into it, I'm just going to mention it, right, is the frenotomies, the frenectomies. It's just creating havoc if you know the function of the tongue muscle and you know the function of the frenula right throughout the body, internally and externally. They all have a specific function, and we, in the oral cavity, on the clitoris, on the penis, we are changing what those functions are, and we don't understand. Well, we don't touch the clitoris really here, not in this country anyway. And then, of course, we do with the penis, depending on different aspects of life and religion. But again, the oral cavity, which I'm really absorbed in, and many of my colleagues now too, understanding it, it's all connected to, it's all synchronized with, and we change it. So
there's that deep connection between your jaw and your pelvic floor. So it's all one and the same.
Well, I'm talking about oral cavity function. And then if you touch the frenula anywhere else, then you're changing things there. But I'm talking about the baby's oral cavity function. I'm talking about understanding what it does and how long it takes to recover, and who's actually looking at that and doing the research on that. Too busy cutting. It's gone up 866% in America in 10 years. It's up to 490 here or something just on Medicare records, not on everybody. It's going up in the UK. They're looking at it now, as far as I understand. So it's become another phenomenon in life.
It's going to be something that I look into, because this is something that I've not heard about before.
Yeah.
Does that have to do with cutting tongue tie? Is that what you're talking about?
There's no such thing as a tongue tie when cutting a frenula. A frenulum or a frenula. They're cutting a frenulum. And then that's been labelled a tongue tie. So if there's a family history of a major complication, you might look at it differently, but you don't do it to the newborn baby. It's painful. It's horrific. I have a colleague who was present for 5 experiences and walked away. She was horrified. So we don't do that to little babies, and we wait and see an experienced oral surgeon if it's necessary with a family history, and that's done when the child can have a light anaesthetic. Yeah.
I think that's a huge takeaway point for anybody listening to.
I'm just barely coping with it at the moment, with what mothers are going through the coercion of all these things. That's just another thing in the isation syndrome. It's just been wound up. And for this old midwife who I have had a lot of experience, it is not fair to mothers and babies. So mothers writing a journal and keeping a history of their own is so important if they've got the energy and time. Their partners joining them with it and writing everything down as they feel like it, not in a set planned way, because that's overwhelming. And if they want to jot a note, just jot a note, and then they can write about it later. It's so important. And it helps them work through, if they've had traumas, it helps them work through that as well.
So what would be, if you could take all of your amazing experience, is there any one thing, or my final question to you would be, what's the one thing that you wish all women knew before having a baby?
About their instinctive knowledge, about themselves. Sit and think about what feels right for you, what you think, oh, maybe that's going to be it, and just tune into it. That would be one. Understanding what the professionals learn, educated about, so that you understand where they're coming from, so that if you do need help, you understand that. But if you don't need help, you can use the law of consent and say, no, thank you. So again, it is no one rule, but what I would say is as much information between those people that are involved in that with that mother and her baby and her progress of labour. Progress of labour is so important, and it's really easy to watch progress of labour and understand it if you're doing it. And if you're doing it as a young person learning all this, or a midwife learning, please find someone who's going to mentor you, who's really skilled at it, because there are midwives out there. There's some amazing colleagues of mine that have been around for as long as me, and oh my goodness, they're incredible. I would say go step by step, but if you're not happy, please speak up. If there's something you particularly want, make sure you've got it in writing, as well as speaking with them and making sure that they give you meeting time to talk about it, and then ask for it to be in your record, so that, and you keep a copy in your record. And if you want to take copies with you to the labour ward, like a note on the door saying, please knock and wait, private space. And it might not be a private hospital, but that's her space while she's there.
I love that. That's such
any cameras that are on outside the room, they must be turned off. That's an invasion of privacy. Women's bodies are exposed to everybody, and people used to run in and just want to see a birth, and then off they go. And it was hallelujah for them, but the mother's just overwhelmed. Just had one mother, and I can't go into her history, but she was told that there would be 11 people at her birth. So she said no, and guess what? It worked.
Good. 11 people.
Yeah.
11 people. And that comes back to what you were talking about before, that dominant position of people standing over a woman in her absolutely most vulnerable state that she is ever going to be in. And you have an instinctual feeling of someone standing over you, and what that's going to do to your physiology when you're in a vulnerable state is the complete opposite of what needs to be happening when you're trying to give birth.
Be respectful and step back. And tone your voice, very quiet, very calm.
That's exactly how you speak.
It's so important. I just can't emphasize it enough. And I know people will get sick of me, but don't worry, I'm not here forever. So.
Well, I have appreciated the time that you've given me, your precious time that you've given me. And I could sit here and talk to you for hours. It's because I genuinely, everything that you've been saying, I'm like sitting here furiously, like nodding my head at. And it's really interesting how so many of the things that you've been saying, because the pregnancy process program takes women from the beginning of their first trimester all the way through to the end of their fourth trimester across education, mindset, training, and nutrition. And there's so much of what you've been saying is aligned to things that I talk about as well. So
good. So we're on the same tram.
Yes, and it's been such an enlightening conversation, and it's such a blessing to be able to talk to you, and I'm just so grateful for your time today. So
Tammy, I'm happy that you're out there doing what you're doing. That's amazing too. So take care.
And if you're hearing this message, I want to say a huge thank you, because it means that you've listened to this entire episode. Of course, if you have any questions about the things that we covered in this episode, or want to know more about me or my other projects, you can find me on YouTube and Instagram at The Pregnancy Process. For those currently in their conception or pregnancy journey, you can actually apply to join my complimentary but private community, the Preggy Training Crew. And you'll find my community application and social media links in the episode description. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, I absolutely encourage you to share it with other women just like you. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.